Saturday night and I just got paid. A fool about money, don't try to save. My heart says go, go, have a time. Saturday night, baby.
One of the most amazing things to do in this show is just the, as a dear deceased client of mine used to say, the myriad of things that you run into and the myriad of people from all walks of life. And it is always a pleasure when, at least for me, when I come across a, I like to call people like this gentleman that I'm about to speak to, and who will be speaking to you, my audience, a lost treasure, because he has stories that actually are so touching and so near and dear, involving not one but two great historical figures. The first being Jackie Robinson, the second being John F. Kennedy. And if you were a kid like me and you grew up in the 1960s, these were pivotal people in my life. Jackie Robinson was actually, I should say I was living in his hometown, Stamford, Connecticut, and it's just, it's something to me that's very close. The gentleman's name, Ron Rabinovitz, and I've had the pleasure of speaking with Ron before, and I've got him here tonight. Ronnie, how are you, my friend?
Good, Tony. How you doing, buddy?
I am fine. And, you know, there's so many ways we can talk about Jackie, but I'd like to take it from the perspective of you as a boy baseball fan in Wisconsin. Presumably you were a Braves fan. I don't think I ever asked you. And how this whole thing with Jackie came about.
Well, I never was a Braves fan. I was always a Dodgers fan.
Ah.
Because of Jackie. But I grew up in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, which is just north of Milwaukee. And my dad was very ahead of his time. He was very much involved in civil rights. And he loved the Dodgers because they gave Jackie an opportunity to play Major League Baseball. So he said to me, "How would you like to meet him someday?" And I said, "Boy, would I love that." Well, unbeknownst to me, he wrote Jackie a letter. Didn't want to tell me about it in case Jackie didn't respond. He didn't want me disappointed.
To have your feelings hurt.
Right, right. So he told him how much I admired him, and Jackie wrote back with the autographed picture. He said, "Next time the club's in Milwaukee playing the Braves, he'd love to meet me." And of course, at that time, the Atlanta Braves were the Milwaukee Braves. So we went to a Dodger Brave game. And after the game, we went down to the locker room and waited for him to come out. And there were other ball players that were coming out first, and all these kids were running for them, and I didn't move. I was just waiting for one guy. When he came out, I ran up to him with about 50 other kids, and I said, "Jackie, I'm Ronnie Rabinovitz. Do you remember me?" And he said, "Sure, I do." And my dad's standing over my shoulder. He said, "Sure, Jackie. With the thousands of letters you get, how would you remember?" Well, I remember your dad wrote me on Lawyer Stationery. My father was an attorney. And then from that time on, Tony, we were the best of friends. And all through my growing up years, I used to write letters to him, and he'd write back to me. I'd write Jackie Robinson, Stamford, Connecticut, no address, no zip code. And he'd write Ronnie Rabinovitz, Sheboygan, Wisconsin, no address, no zip code, and I get it.
And was he answering these letters during the season?
Sometimes during the season, sometimes off season. But they all kept coming. I'll bet I have 20, 22 letters, all in total. And to be honest with you, I might have lost a couple along the way.
It's an absolutely unbelievable story. Now, in the letters, what sorts of things did you speak about with Mr. Robinson?
Well, he would tell me about his family, and I would tell him about mine. He would ask me how I'm doing in school. And, you know, Jackie was a Republican, which was very unusual in those days. So
for a black man, sure.
All these sweet letters, every once in a while, he'd put something in, by the way, tell your dad that such and such made me more of a Republican, and I don't think that the Democrats are going to win. And then he'd say, "I don't know why I brought that up. I guess it's just my way of saying hi to your dad." So it was pretty crazy, you know. It was didn't like the Democrats at the time because the leaders of the Democratic Party were all Dixiecrats. And they were, they were not racially ahead of their time.
It was the days of the Solid South. You're absolutely right.
Right, exactly.
Completely.
That makes sense.
And it's when you got out to the park in Milwaukee, presumably when Jackie played, did you chat with him then?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We spoke for quite a bit of time. And then, of course, he had to get on the bus to go back to the hotel. But we stayed in touch. He said to me, stay in touch. And I said, my God, he wants to hear from me again. So I wrote him a letter, and he wrote back to me, and he was telling me about his family and everything else. And it was just terrific. He was just such a wonderful man.
Now...
Tony, oh, go ahead.
No, please go ahead, Ron.
One time, Tony, he came out of the locker room in Milwaukee. The team was going on the bus to go back to the hotel because the series wasn't done yet. So I'm walking with him, and we're talking, and he's signing kids' autographs, and the guys are getting on the bus. Here comes a priest with a whole parish full of kids. They all want autographs. And he's standing and signing and signing and signing. Pretty soon, the guys on the bus are opening their windows. Come on, Jackie, you're holding us up. You know what he did? He went to the bus driver. He said, you know what? Take the guys back to the hotel. I'll take a cab. And he stood there and he signed every kid's autograph.
That's absolutely amazing.
That's the way he was.
There's that one little piece of film, you and I and Zig and George have talked about it, where the one surviving piece of Happy Felton's Knothole Gang,
right,
where Jackie is the guest of the evening and he's putting the kids through the drills. And I remember my first wife, Jean, my first wife, who is now deceased, was watching this the very first time I saw it, and it's a shocking piece of film to see, in the sense that when you're watching this, you're actually back in Ebbets Field before a game.
Right.
And you see the people walking, and you hear Gladys Gooding playing the organ, and it's to me it just gives me chills.
Sure, of course, it was great. I never was at Ebbets Field, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, and I think we had discussed that. That's correct. But the one thing, and this I wanted to point out to you. When my wife Jean and I were watching this, she looked at me and she said, he's got such great manners. He's so polite. He's so respectful. He's so kind. Yeah. Is that the way he was to boys?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what he used to do, Tony? Kids would fill out a self-addressed postcard. And when he's coming out of the dressing room at Ebbets Field, the kids would hand him these postcards, and he'd take them home and he would write them a little note. Who does that? I mean, that's the type of guy he was. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's nice when you see Aaron Judge these days, going over and signing balls and, sharing with the kids. We've just lost so much of that in baseball, where the players just don't really pay attention anymore. But it's just, that was such a great part of baseball, at least the baseball we knew.
No question about it. Today, I mean, there's still a few guys that are great like that, but there's a lot of them that aren't.
Yeah, for certain.
And it's too bad. I mean, look at the impression it made on me as a kid. I mean, this was my hero. And, of course, at first I only loved him because he was helping my Dodgers win pennants. But as I got older, I realized how much more than just baseball he was.
Now, of other players on that club, during that time or since, have you developed relationships, or had you developed relationships with other Brooklyn Dodger players?
I did. After he retired, I wrote him a letter once because I was trying to get friendly with a couple of the other Dodgers. And they were nice, but they weren't like, they weren't Jackie,
Yeah.
And I wrote him a letter about that. He wrote back and he said, don't feel too badly. Ronnie, he said every kid would love to be friends with a major leaguer. And, of course, you know, it would take them a lot of time to stop and talk to everybody. He said, if they knew you like I know you, they wouldn't walk away. That's what he told me. And that was really encouraging for a kid, you know.
For certain. It's just such an unbelievable relationship. Now, during that time of the baseball season, when his anniversary comes and all the players wear number 42, are you called upon during that time to give your recollections?
I am quite often. First of all, I travel all over the country. I do a lot of speaking about diversity and about Jackie. I have a PowerPoint presentation, and I show a little bit of a DVD, and I've done that for almost 30 years now. And on April 15th, if I'm in Los Angeles, I'm on the field at Dodger Stadium. If I'm in Minneapolis, where I live now, I am at Target Field with the Twins. And I love to see everybody wearing number 42. It's such a thrill. Such a thrill.
It is really, it's just, it sends chills down my spine. Now, when Jackie separates from baseball in 1956 after being traded to the New York Giants, which it was unbelievable. I mean, I was a 1-year-old back then.
I was sick. I was just sick. I mean, I said, how could they do that to him? You know, our hated Giants, how could they do that to him? You know, it was bad. It was not a good thing.
Now, with that being as it is, Jackie gets a job with Chock full of nuts, working, being the director of personnel. You're moving on in your life. You're leaving your, your boyhood, and you're moving into adolescence and young adulthood. Was there any communications there between you and Jackie, because you were both kind of embarking in new phases of your life that, of course, had to be somewhat uncertain for both of you?
Oh, no, there was a lot of communication. In one of his letters, he had given me his unlisted phone number in Stamford, Connecticut. And, of course, I would call him occasionally, but we would still write. But it was odd because I used to get stationery that said Jackie Robinson, and now it said Chock full of nuts. But we stayed in touch. After he retired, I cried and cried. I thought, what the hell would he ever want to come back to Wisconsin for? And he assured me everything would be okay. He said his own son, Jackie Jr., was crying. And he assured both of us that everything would be okay. And, in fact, it was, because he used to come back for many, many functions. He was very active with an organization called the National Conference of Christian Jews. He used to come back for sports banquets. And he'd let us know when he's coming, and we would spend the afternoon or the evening, or in some cases the entire weekend with him.
Now, please continue.
Sorry?
No, I said please continue. I interrupted. I apologize.
No, you didn't. That's fine. And so he would come in. One time he came in from Birmingham, Alabama. We met him at the airport in Milwaukee. And he was very disturbed when he came off the plane. He had gotten to the airport in Birmingham to catch his plane. He had made a speech down there. And in the airport, in the waiting room, it said whites only. And he sat down. And the police came, and they were going to arrest him. And then they found out he was Jackie Robinson. They left him alone. Well, when he came off that plane in Milwaukee, he said, Ronnie, if my name would have been Paul Jones or John Smith or anybody else other than Jackie Robinson, I'd be in jail today because of the color of my skin. Those are things we have to change. And he was so right.
Now, and this is going from recollection, which I'm sure you'll fill me in on. He had sort of a, I don't want to use the word, maybe an odd-angled relationship with the Kennedys. Yes. How did all that come about, and how did your particular relationship come about with JFK?
Well, my dad was very active in politics. He was the Democratic National Committeeman for the state of Wisconsin. And he was in Washington for some hearings for 6 weeks in 1958. don't know if you ever recall the Kohler Company. They make toilets, bathtubs, sinks. Big company all over the world there are. Well, there was a big strike in Sheboygan, the Kohler strike.
Right.
And my dad was the chief counsel of the UAW in that strike. So in 1958, the McClellan Committee, which was the Senate Rackets Committee, was investigating the Kohler strike. Jack Kennedy was a senator on the committee, and Bobby was chief counsel of the McClellan Committee. So Bobby and Jack both came to Sheboygan. They both stayed at our home at a different time, that time, and my dad got to be very, very close friends with them. So my dad was the one that convinced Jack to run in the Wisconsin primary in 1960.
Jack Kennedy, yes.
Because he felt that if he could beat Humphrey and Hubert Humphrey in his backyard, it would help catapult him to the nomination, which in fact it did. So he took me out of high school off and on for 6 weeks during the primary, and I traveled around with the whole Kennedy family. I got to know them very well. I was the gopher. Go for this and go for that. So Jack would be up in his suite during a banquet. He would never want to eat his food at the banquet because by the time he got to it, it was cold. So he'd be up in his hotel suite. He'd say, "Ronnie, go get me the usual." And I'd run down the back steps to the kitchen. And the usual was a cup of clam chowder soup, a peanut butter sandwich, and a glass of beer. I'd bring it to him. But anyhow, so my dad was in Washington, D.C. one time for a Democratic National Committee meeting. And Jackie Robinson happened to be at that hotel for a different function. So my dad took Jackie Robinson up to Jack Kennedy's suite to try to convince, Jack wanted to try and convince him to support him. And he wouldn't do it. He thought, what does a rich kid from Massachusetts have any idea of the plight of the African Americans? So he did support Richard Nixon. And later on, he admitted to me that he made a big mistake. And in 1968, he did support Bobby Kennedy for president. So, but it was a time. It was a different time than now, as I said. It was and then he realized that Jack Kennedy was helping. He was the one that was instrumental in getting Martin Luther King out of jail because he was arrested for a march, I think, in Birmingham, maybe.
Right.
He asked Nixon to help, and Nixon wouldn't do a damn thing. So Jackie got upset with that, and he kind of turned the tide. He was but he still had made a commitment to Nixon, so he kept his word. He was very close to Nelson Rockefeller. That was his. And today,
he did a lot of work under Rockefeller.
To be a Democrat today, things are going, But so it was quite amazing. So I was a very fortunate kid. Other than my father, who I adored and was my true hero, my two other heroes were Jack Kennedy and Jackie Robinson.
Now, one little bit of trivia, if you can answer this for me. When I was really small, my brother was older. He was somewhat into the 1960s political race. I was an age where you had to take me by the hand. So we were visiting in Jersey City, New Jersey, and Jack Kennedy was giving a rally in Journal Square. All I remember is just people all over the place, and we kind of noodled down and somehow ended up very close to the stage. And my recollections of Jack Kennedy were ramrod straight, gray suit, white shirt, red tie, and the reddest hair I've ever seen on a human being. Is that accurate?
I don't remember him having red hair.
Oh, really?
Well, that I don't remember at all. His hair was dark. I don't think it was real black or anything, but it was. I don't think it was red.
Okay. Then he was
a handsome dude, I'll tell you.
Yeah, he was pretty spectacular.
Such a nice man.
But if Jackie, I understand, during the 1960s and the Civil Rights Movement, he didn't get along with other leaders as well as he may have some others. Were you? Was he communicating any of that to you?
Sure, he was. He never was crazy about Malcolm X, because Malcolm X was more of a militant. He wanted a different way to get his things across. But Jackie didn't believe in that. He liked Martin Luther King. And I was in Los Angeles about a year and a half ago, and I was interviewed by Larry King. He had flown me out there to do an interview, and he was telling me a story that the first time he interviewed Martin Luther King, he introduced him as the founder of the Civil Rights Movement. And Martin Luther King stopped him and corrected him and said, "Larry, I have to correct you. I'm not the founder. Jackie Robinson was." Can you imagine?
Can you imagine?
Because Martin Luther King was a teenager. He was just in college. He was a freshman in college, I think, at that time. And there was no civil rights movement. There was no Rosa Parks. There was no Martin Luther King. It was just Jackie alone.
But for Jackie. In our closing moments together, Jackie's post-baseball life, 1956 to his passing in 1972. As we've talked about in the past, he did a number of remarkable things. Chock full of nuts, the Freedom Bank, working for Nelson Rockefeller. Do you think he was satisfied with that period in his life? Or do you think he would have liked a better ending, perhaps maybe doing one or two different things?
Well, I think he liked that. He got involved quite a bit. I mean, he used to go down to the South and help rebuild churches that were burned to the ground. He started a construction company so that African Americans could get correct housing availabilities where they weren't allowed in certain other areas. Of course, Freedom National Bank, he started that because
they couldn't get loans.
Banks were giving the African American people a higher interest rate. So, I mean, so he did a lot of wonderful things. He would have loved to have been back in baseball, and he would have been a phenomenal manager.
He sure would have.
Branch Rickey always said that there was no one else more qualified than Jackie Robinson to be a manager. But, of course, in those days, there wasn't opportunity for African Americans.
Wasn't allowed.
Too bad. It was too bad.
Well, Ron, no, please go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, but please, I interrupted you. I just wanted to let you know that we're coming up on the end, but please give me your final thoughts.
Okay. I think he was a tremendous man. I loved him dearly. I was with him about 6 months before he passed away in New York. I live in Minneapolis now, but I used to be in the garment business. So every time I'd get to New York, I'd call him, and we'd either get together for lunch, or if he was too busy, we would just talk on the phone. But I was with him about 6 months before he passed away. He was in pretty rough shape, Tony. He had had a heart attack. He had suffered from diabetes for many years. He was blind in one eye, going blind in the other eye. And I had to take him by the arm and help him into this restaurant, which happened to be Mama Leone's. And I felt so sad because I had to help him, and I remembered him dancing up and down the faces. And he was so happy to see me. He wanted to hear all about my family, and I, of course, about his. And then afterwards, I hailed him a cab. I got him settled in the cab, and I leaned and I kissed him on the cheek and told him how much I loved him. And as that cab disappeared into sight, into space, I was standing at that corner with tears streaming down my cheeks because I knew I would never see him again, And they say Babe Ruth changed baseball. Jackie Robinson changed America, and he did it alone. He did it alone.
He sure did. The man, Ron Rabinovitz, friend of Jackie Robinson, going out today and preaching the message of Jackie Robinson. And Ron, thank you so much for being here this evening. I really do appreciate it. And thank you for sharing those wonderful moments with Jackie and with JFK.
Tony, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you. We'll talk soon, my friend.
Okay.
Bye
okay,
now.
if you ever get to Minneapolis, let me know.
Yeah, well, believe me, if I can get down to Bridgeport these days, I'm doing something, but I'm working on it.
Okay.
Take care, bye.
Bye-bye.
That was Ron Rabinovitz, and what just a heartwarming story. We're going to be coming back with some retro-mercials, and then some great historical happenings, all to do with the home run. We'll be right back, right after.